Wonderful. I'm going to read from 2 Chronicles chapter 20. I'll endeavor to be reasonably brief. It happened after this that the people of Moab with the people of Ammon and others with them, besides the Ammonites, came to battle against Jehoshaphat. Then some came and told Jehoshaphat, saying, "A great multitude is coming against you from beyond the sea, from Syria, and they are in Hazon Tamar, which is En-gedi." Jehoshaphat feared and set himself to seek the Lord and proclaimed a fast throughout all Judah. So Judah gathered together to ask help from the Lord, and from all the cities of Judah they came to seek the Lord. This part of Bible history is such an interesting time. It's a very crucial time in the history of the Middle East, which has a direct effect on us today, for it's recorded in the Bible. So this period of history is recorded for all times. And it's recorded how God intervened on behalf of people. And God is the same yesterday, today, and forever, the book of Hebrews declares. So what he did with Jehoshaphat, he will do with us. He'll work with you and your family. He'll work with you as an individual. He'll work with us as a Christian family of people called Worship Center. So it's a very relevant passage of Scripture, is 2 Chronicles chapter 20. Just let me briefly give you a brief resume of history in the Bible. We know they went into the promised land under the leadership of Joshua. When Joshua died, the judges rose up, and they're all recorded in the book of Judges. And that spans 400 years of history. God raised up a charismatic figure who led the people, usually through a time of difficulty, and then he would lead Israel until he died and another one rose up, etc. And then there came a time where the people wanted a king, and God gave them a king called Saul. Saul was not a very wise person. He wouldn't obey God. He followed his own way whenever the crisis was on. And so God couldn't use him, and God rejected him. God anointed David to be king. And after many years of being hunted in the wilderness, this shepherd boy David went into the wilderness a shepherd boy, but he came out a mighty man fit to be king and to lead God's people to victory for 40 long years. And he did. After David came Solomon. David and Solomon, Saul, David and Solomon ruled over united Israel. After Solomon's death, his son was not wise at all. He increased a heavy burden of taxation and all other things on the people, and the kingdom split into two. 10 tribes, for Israel was made up of 12 tribes. The sons of Jacob became the heads of tribes. There's 10 tribes split off, and they're called the northern tribes. They were actually called Israel. And if you're reading this period of history in Chronicles, Kings, you'll read Israel. The 2 southern tribes, Judah and Benjamin, were called Judah. And so you have Israel and Judah. Israel had kings, and Judah had their own king. So there were different kings. It's the time of the prophets, and the prophets would prophesy. Some prophets were prophesying in northern Israel, which were the 10 tribes, and some in southern Israel. The northern king at the time of Jehoshaphat that we read about in 2 Chronicles 20, which we're coming to now. The northern king was a king that most of us have heard about. His name was Ahab, and he was married to Jezebel. So he was a compatriot with Jehoshaphat. You have Jehoshaphat, a very godly man, down in the southern tribes, Judah, And Ahab and Jezebel were king over Israel, the 10 northern tribes. Jehoshaphat was an incredibly wise, godly, and good man. Stable, solid, reliable, and brilliant. There's no doubt about it. The Bible record of him tells you so. He only made one big mistake in my little mind. They used to form alliances to prevent civil war. Kings would go to war with kings, take their armies out. And one of the ways they had to try and prevent this was into marriage. So a king, because it was a day of multiple wives, would marry a daughter of another king. Now those kings wouldn't fight each other because there was a marriage alliance. And Jehoshaphat had his son marry the eldest daughter of Ahab and Jezebel. I think that was a mistake, but however, who would want Jezebel for a mother-in-law? Or a sister-in-law? Or anything about law? You just wouldn't want anything to do with that woman. She had a face that would, if you hit it with an axe, you'd chip the axe. And if ever you could feel sorry for a wicked, ruthless king like Ahab, you'd have to feel that he married a woman he deserved. He was a very foolish man, and she was a very bad woman. Like, she'd murder 400 people at the drop of a hat, which she actually did. So she wasn't very bright at all. So he got his son to marry their eldest daughter to form an alliance. That was, to my mind, his only great mistake. He did some marvelous things. He resisted idolatry. And idolatry was rife in the 10 northern tribes, encouraged by Ahab and Jezebel. He paid people to go from city and village to village, teaching people the ways of God. Very wise move. To teaching them the lifestyle that God wanted them to live so that the nation of Judah would please God. I think that shows his sheer intelligence. He was a very able administrator. He set judges in every city and town. And then he had a high council in Jerusalem where the cases that the local judges couldn't handle would come before the high council. This high council was made up of priests, Levites, the tribe that the priests came from, which were godly people, and he also heads of families. Now we know, and I'm sure they won't mind me saying it, we know the Power family. I have the highest regard for the Power family. It's a big family. But there would be one individual who would be the living head of the Power family or the Power clan. See my friend Val sitting back there, he's the head of the Fittler family. So heads of families were part of that high council in Jerusalem. They were the senior figures of families. They'd raised families, they'd raised their whole family, because family units never separated like they do in Australia. That was a clan. And so he had to have a lot of wisdom to be a successful head of a family. And Jehoshaphat brought them in. His life is summed up in 2 Chronicles chapter 22 and verse 9. And if you see that verse on the screen, I'm only taking one phrase out of it because it has its own context. And the phrase, they said about Jehoshaphat that he sought the Lord with all of his heart. Therefore, they wanted to kill his son. That was the northern Israel mob. Because he sought the Lord with all of his heart. That is a great testimony to have. And I think in Australia, while many people feel God is irrelevant, but they are wrong, God is highly relevant to your life, to my life, and to Australia's security and Australia's future. We live in a very dangerous age with the rise of Russia. Now, Russian people are wonderful people, but the communistic atmosphere that's over them is not wonderful. The control of Europe's oil, the rise of China, and again, I have many Chinese friends, but it's a communist regime that rules the country. The weakening of the West, the rise of Islam. The world is in a dangerous state, in my opinion.